Back at the cartel hideout, tension thickened as the black SUV remained motionless. The crew exchanged wary glances. One of them, a hardened enforcer, finally stepped forward, gripping his weapon. He was about to call out when the SUV's back door creaked open. A single boot stepped onto the dirt, followed by a figure no one expected to see. It wasn't law enforcement. It wasn't a rival. It was someone they all recognized, someone who was supposed to be on their side. The young member's stomach dropped. If this person was involved, then they had seriously miscalculated. This wasn't just about an old man's flag anymore. This was something bigger, something that could turn their whole world upside down. The veteran, still watching from his porch miles away, already knew. He had called in a favor, but even he hadn't expected it to go this deep. Now the question wasn't just who would make the next move, but who would survive it. The air inside the cartel hideout turned ice cold as the figure stepped fully into the light. Eyes widened. The crew, once so sure of their control, now stood frozen in place. This was no ordinary man. He was someone with influence, someone who only showed up when things had gone too far. The young member swallowed hard, realizing too late that this wasn't just a warning. This was a reckoning. Outside, the SUV's engine cut off. More doors opened. Footsteps, steady and deliberate, crunched against the gravel. The enforcer who had reached for his weapon hesitated. He wasn't sure who these people were, but he knew enough to understand one thing. This was bigger than their crew, bigger than the message they had tried to send. Miles away, the veteran watched the distant glow of headlights disappearing into the night. He didn't need to know the details. The call had been made, and the response had been swift. He knew the people he had contacted weren't the kind to leave unfinished business. He simply turned, stepped back inside, and closed the door behind him. By morning, the cartel hideout was abandoned. No sign of struggle, no trace of what had happened, just empty beer bottles and a burned-out fire pit. The town remained quiet, unchanged on the surface, but everyone felt the shift. The veteran's flag, once reduced to ashes, had been replaced overnight. A brand new one waved proudly in the morning breeze, untouched. But the real twist came later. The young cartel member, the one who had sensed something was wrong, had vanished. Some whispered he had switched sides, knowing the weight of the mistake his crew had made. Others believed he had simply disappeared, swallowed up by forces greater than he could understand. The veteran never spoke about what happened that night, and when people asked about the flag, he only smiled and said, "Some things take care of themselves." Life in the town slowly returned to normal, but those who paid attention knew something had changed. The cartel's presence faded, their usual intimidation tactics disappearing overnight. No one asked questions and no one needed to. The message had been delivered, loud and clear. Some battles weren't fought with guns or threats. They were won with quiet power, the kind that came from respect and the right connections. The veteran carried on as he always had, tending to his home, greeting neighbors, and sitting on his porch beneath the new flag that waved proudly above him. He never mentioned the night his old one was burned. To him, the lesson had already been learned by those who needed to learn it. As for the young cartel member who vanished, rumors lingered, but no one knew the truth, and maybe that was for the best. Some stories are meant to stay unfinished. It started with a simple flag, tattered but proud, waving outside the home of an old veteran in a quiet Texas town. For him, that flag wasn't just cloth. It was a lifetime of sacrifice, honor, and the friends he lost serving his country. But one night, a ruthless cartel crew, looking to send a message, set it ablaze. They laughed as the flames swallowed its stars and stripes, thinking they had made their point. What they didn't know was who they had just messed with. This wasn't just any old man. This was someone with connections, someone who had fought battles far beyond their understanding. As the embers smoldered, he picked up the phone. One call, just one, and everything changed. The cartel was about to realize they had crossed the wrong man. But who was on the other end of that call? And what happened next left even them in shock. The old veteran sat in his dimly lit kitchen, the glow of a single bulb reflecting off his weathered face. His hands, steady despite the years, gripped the phone as he dialed a number he hadn't called in a long time. On the other end, a deep voice answered, a voice that carried the weight of old promises and unspoken debts. The veteran spoke calmly, his words measured, but there was an edge beneath them. Meanwhile, word of the burned flag spread through the town. Neighbors whispered, anger simmering beneath their quiet concern. This wasn't just an attack on one man, it felt personal, an insult to everything he had fought for. Some dismissed it as just another act of intimidation, but others knew better. This veteran wasn't the type to let things slide. Somewhere in the night, engines rumbled and phones buzzed with quiet urgency. The wheels had been set in motion. As the night stretched on, the veteran sat by his window, watching the dark road outside his house. He had been through too much in his life to be rattled, but this was different. This wasn't a battlefield in some faraway country. This was his home. And now someone had tried to send him a message, but they had no idea the kind of message he was about to send back. Across town, the cartel crew lounged in a run-down house on the outskirts, laughing about what they had done. To them, it was nothing more than a show of power, a reminder that they owned this territory. But one of the younger members, barely more than a kid, couldn't shake an uneasy feeling. The old man hadn't reacted the way others did. No panic, no pleading. Just that cold, steady look before he disappeared inside. Something about it didn't sit right. Miles away, the man on the other end of the veteran's phone call was already making moves. He wasn't just an old friend, he was a man with reach, someone who knew how to pull strings in places that mattered. The veteran didn't ask for favors often, but when he did, people listened. The question now was, how far would this go? And who would be the first to regret what had started? A cold wind blew through the veteran's small town as he stepped onto his porch, his eyes scanning the empty road. He knew they were watching. The cartel never left loose ends, but neither did he. The call he made had set something in motion, and now it was only a matter of time. His old military instincts kicked in: stay alert, be patient, and never show fear. Back at the cartel's safe house, the younger member who had felt uneasy earlier now watched as his crew laughed, passing around bottles like this was just another night. But he couldn't shake the nagging sense that they had gone too far. He had heard stories, whispers about men like this veteran, men who didn't just fade away. He checked his phone. Unread messages, missed calls. Something was happening, but no one else seemed to notice. Then, without warning, a black SUV rolled to a stop outside the cartel's hideout. The laughter died instantly. The crew tensed, hands moving toward their weapons. But no one got out of the vehicle. The engine hummed, the headlights cutting through the darkness like sharp eyes locked on their every move. At that same moment, the veteran's phone buzzed on the table beside him. He answered without hesitation. A low voice on the other end spoke just 3 words: "It's happening now." The veteran didn't say a word. He just set the phone down, exhaled slowly, and stepped back into the shadows of his porch. He had been in situations like this before, where silence meant more than words, where a single moment could decide everything. The night felt heavier now, charged with something unseen but undeniable.